Steve Hickey, welcome to Undivided.
Thank you for having me on.
So talk about how you got into the independent journalism thing.
Sure. So, I was kind of doing amateur photography and about 6-7 years ago, just on my own. And then 2020 happens and a whole lot's happening in the world, a lot of protests in Seattle. My original plan was to just go out and capture it and maybe sometime down the road have a library as documentaries and so on were going to be made, not realizing how intense it was going to be. And then as that happens, NBC comes to town during the Chaz Chop days. They see what I'm filming, offer me a deal to start doing a licensing deal, about 30 seconds a night, and it takes off. Next thing I know, I'm going down to Portland, covering Seattle 3 nights a week, Portland 3 nights a week, and then it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, you have built up a pretty big social media following. How many followers do you think you have across platforms?
I think it's about 1.35 million now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is that a significant source of revenue for you, that aspect of?
Not as much as I thought. I think, because I try to go down the center and, try and just go, I'm there at the early on stage, right? So I don't get into the after it's happened, here's the cause and effect and the people involved. It's really, here's what happened, here's who's responded, here's how it wrapped up. That's where I prefer to be, and I like to stay out of the commentary side. But
smart man.
Right. But the advertising revenue is not as good as it is in the other side when you have a little bit more dedicated base.
Yeah. So I told you offline about why I wanted to have you in, because I understand how hard you have to work to build an audience like that. And I imagine that it's been a shit couple weeks for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has.
Can you characterize just from when the story started, what that's been like for you personally?
Yeah, it's been very chaotic. There's the story itself and then there's the reaction to it, right? And so the reaction, especially the first go around, was somebody who is has a very large following on YouTube and a broader audience. So I'm pretty hyper local, and that person is more of a national, maybe even global.
This Tyler Oliveira.
Tyler Oliveira, that's right. So as people are following, I'm getting a lot of comments and such, but not much else. And they don't seem to be people who were following me before because I'm pretty hyper local. But then as it's kind of gone on, and now, with Jonathan Cho going with it, because they started on it together, but Tyler kind of did the load of getting it uploaded under his accounts. And now with Jonathan continuing with the story, it's gotten more intense on a local level.
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 distinct aspects to these accusations that I want to cover as distinct stories, because I don't really see a lot of overlap there. So the initial one is that you're a squatter. That was the hour-long video. They talked about the Bellevue squatting case, which we've discussed quite a bit, which is a really egregious example of very clear squatting. Some other examples. And then they get to you and they call you a white-collar squatter. So let's talk about whether you're a squatter or not, okay? Because I will say, sitting here, knowing what I know, I can't say that I 100% agree with the characterization of a squatter. There are some concerns I have, though. So let's go through it point by point. So you're living in Ravensdale.
That's correct.
In a very nice house. Very nice house. So you had tried to explain the process of, you entered into agreement with an old owner to buy this house in kind of an unusual way, but to buy it nonetheless. So explain that.
That's correct. So it was going to be what's called an option contract. It was going to have a 5-year term. So we had 2 things that we were trying to solve. He needed to move to Arizona and finish his building. He needed a certain amount of money to do that, which was $75,000. I was looking for more space, and out there it's pretty affordable, all things considered, right? And so I look at the house. He has it on market. It's not selling for the price he wants, but there's a brand new community on the other side of a very small town. You can pick your finishes and move right in. And so I said, I don't think your pricing's wrong. I think your timing's off. If you could wait a year, great. He says, I can't. I need to go, in the next 3 months. So I give him the $75,000 down. We agree on a monthly, which was a certain amount for rent and a certain amount to keep that option going. And then the price changed every year. We went through this. It went fine. As he said, in the first 2 years, it was really going pretty smooth, even through the pandemic. And then we get to the end of 21. I send notification saying, hey, I'd like to execute the contract early. My plan was to put it on market because the contract allows me to do that.
And you knew you could get a higher price.
That's right. Yeah. And I would never enter into a contract like this without that assignable portion, especially on a 5-year term. You don't know what's going to happen. Life changes. You need to move. You want to have the ability that I've advanced you a lot of money. I want to be able to get that money back and hopefully, if all things go well, make a profit. And so I said, hey, I want to list it. He asked in February for some information about, well, what are you going to list it for? And it seemed at the time like he was just curious. We've known each other for a while. It didn't seem out of line. I send it to him. He sees I'm going to make a significant amount of money and now says, well, I'm not going to give you the option to just list it and make that assignment fee unless you give me 50%.
Which was a change from your original agreement.
Material change. Okay. Absolute material change. And his justification was, hey, you're going to make a lot of money. This should still be a good thing for you, and you should be almost thankful that I'm allowing you to do it. My side is I don't have to do any of this. However, if go back in the Wayback Machine, early 22, coming out of pandemic, interest rates are going to start going up. Everybody's worried about where the market's going to go. So I'm thinking I need to get this done quickly. And my attorney at the time said, get to a deal that makes sense. And if we have to litigate later, we can, but you don't want to tie this thing up now. It will take years. So I go back at him. And as he says, I tried to renegotiate the deal. I was trying to get to something so we didn't end up in a long-term conflict. We keep trying, we can't come to an agreement. So in June, I looked at just buying him out on a construction, basically a hard money loan, to then flip the house. That would still cost me something. I could evaluate later if I wanted to go after him for that. He says, great, let's do that, because he acknowledged, he goes, I can't stop you from buying it, but I do believe I can stop you from the assignment fee. So we put together a financing package. It requires him to do a small carryback because no lender was doing over $1 million at the time. He goes to escrow signs, but won't provide the second mortgage. And that was when we finally just hit. It's like, we're not getting anywhere. I've tried. I've made some considerable concessions that the contract says I don't have to make, but I'm trying to not go into a fight. I'm done. At this point, I'm done. I've paid you hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of that was for my ability to be able to secure this purchase and close it out, and you were blocking me from that. We've hit an impasse.
So at that time, you realized that this is something that's going to end up in the courts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't see how it isn't. I was hoping reality would hit and maybe we'd off-ramp this soon, but the challenge is both of us, and I think he would agree too, both of us are pretty thick-headed and we're both feeling challenged at the time. And I'd said that in one of my last conversations, like, neither one of us want to feel like we're in a corner. Let's just make some money and move on.
Yeah. So when was the last month that you paid him any money for living there, like a rent or?
I would have to go back and look exactly. It was in the summertime. There was of
2022.
Right in there, yeah.
2022. And so you have been going down this legal path, but you aren't paying money to live in this property right now.
Well, I've already advanced a significant amount of money, well beyond what it costs just to live there. And
as part of the attempt to buy it, right?
Significant amounts of money.
So that's the summer, you stop paying him while this is litigated in the courts. When did he decide to sell it out from kind of underneath you?
found out, I woke up one morning in August to a line of cars coming up and down the driveway because it had gone on Redfin, significantly undervalued. He had put it out there saying, hey, there's a conflict with the house. In turn, it is listed undervalued. There's a significant upside for anybody who's willing to take it on. I'm thinking there's no way he's going to sell it. There's no chance. No bank would touch this.
With me here.
Right. With me here, no bank would touch this.
Yeah.
And then they do an open house. I don't try to block the open house because I'm thinking, actually, this might not be a bad thing. He might find a buyer and then we can get to resolution at the closing table. So I'm thinking, this is frustrating, but this isn't the end of the world. Then he finds a buyer who's willing to pay all cash and won't go through the bank, doesn't need an appraisal, doesn't need any of that. I don't know personally what kind of due diligence was done. I can't imagine a lot. I believe anybody who has enough money on hand to do a transaction like that will have a financial advisor and an attorney who would say, hey, what you should do is put a contingent offer on here pending resolution and then let this thing work out. With all three parties here, we're pretty much at the finish line. Instead, they go around me. I have it recorded on title. They try and purchase a policy to go around that, and then she takes it on and notifies me in the mail saying, I now control this contract. And I'm thinking, you've got to be absolutely kidding me that you would take that on with this kind of conflict in here.
And did she try to go about the process of getting you evicted?
She sent me in saying, hey, I'm the new person in charge. I'm now taking over the contract. And I sent it to my attorney going, I don't even know where to go with this. I believe I met her during the open house, but I couldn't pick her out of it. There was a lot of people there. So I don't even know who this person is. What do we even do? We sit and wait. At one point later in the year, she sends me an eviction notice. So the process isn't really started outside of a paper being dropped off. I found this out later because really where my mind is, I'm looking at court documents.
Right.
She's saying, hey, we dropped this off at the house. They have proof that they did. So concede that it was dropped off. In my mind, until it's a court process, given everything going on, I'm not taking it seriously. And it never developed into that. I do believe her counsel is smarter than the previous owner's counsel because the previous owner kept trying these eviction proceedings, which don't fit for this. I think her counsel is better and said, hey, don't go down the eviction path. This thing's far too messy. You need to go after the contract. And so now we're really deep into litigation on the contract itself, which is where we should have been the whole time.
Yeah. So this woman's name, Freitag, Katrina Freitag, is she the current owner of the home? You dispute that fundamentally.
I dispute rights, but she's on title.
So she is the owner. But
she's on the title, yeah.
You believe and you're arguing with her that Because explain to me how that would work in a court of law, because you had entered into this agreement with the previous owner. So when you go to court and you're sorting that out, who do you want to continue on with the original agreement that you could finalize and purchase the home? Do you want to buy the home at this point?
I see the only pathway at this point is a settlement. I mean, you can't, she's paid more than I would have had to pay. She can't just give me the keys. I guess in some world that would be possible, but in reality, that's probably not an
So you don't want the home at this point?
Where I was is I wanted to put it on market. But I don't see how that would make any sense at this point. We're not going to resell the home. I think we just need to sit down, the three of us, and settle this out, which myself and my attorney have been trying to get them to do. Is just get to a settlement, and then we go our separate ways.
So settle, pay you out for your troubles as part of this, and then she keeps the home and she gets to move into the home.
I would see that as being a possibility.
Now, why not? This is a woman with 4 kids. Why not move out and let her live in her home while it's being disputed? Or do you lose your leverage that way?
There's certainly a leverage complaint. Why would I move out when I've been wronged by the previous owner? I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from me in this transaction. And now I just give up the stolen goods?
Well, but as you said there, you've been wronged by the previous owner. She is not that person. She
came and willingly purchased it under that pretense.
She did, but just out of the kind of thought that you already have said that you want some sort of settlement for basically what you've been through, and that she'll probably keep the home.
I don't know if that's settlement, resolution.
Which doesn't involve you taking the keys and living there. So you're already saying that you're not going to live there. Like, this lady will probably move her family in.
I'm saying that would probably be the path of least resistance to get to resolution between all of us.
Why not just let her move her family in? Because that wouldn't preclude you from getting a settlement still from your previous owner. The court case would continue, right?
So because she comes in and just purchases it from somebody else who was on title, I should then just give her that home? That doesn't make any sense. Well, not legally. There's legal precedent for the pathway that we're going on here. This isn't just, hey, let's shoot from the hip, see what we can do.
Yeah.
There's legal precedent here.
And I'm not telling you to do anything, but I'm asking you why not do that? Because and I'm trying to sort of explain this. I get it, it's a complicated situation. This is why I don't think this is a squatter situation.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think this is a squatter situation. However, it seems, one, really messy. But if you already know that the resolution that's most likely does not involve you just being given this house, right? Or being able to finalize
we never would be given the house. That was never
or to finalize it. You want your money back, basically, right? You want your money back that you put into the house.
Yeah, that's right.
And so my thought is, why not let this lady and her 4 kids live there? Because you still have the court case going on. You're still actively pursuing a case to get the money back.
And I will still
from
continue.
This other guy, not from her.
I don't know that that's true.
You think that she might have to pay you the money
I don't
back?
know. And that's what the court needs to determine. She came in here willingly knowing it. That was what mystified me so much, is why would you take that risk? You've come in and then even said in writing that I now take the responsibility of this contract. She was savvy enough to also, and this is part of where I think she seems to have no desire to try and settle this thing. She says, she's told us that she is indemnified from legal fees. The previous owner is paying her legal bills. So at that point, she seems to have no other reason to actually try and solve this. So,
but to get in the house is a pretty big reason. If I paid cash for a house and I want to live in it, I have a huge motivation to solve it.
We should all three get to a settlement table then and get this done.
Do you think it would be an act of good faith to move out of the house while you wait for that resolution? Because what happens at the end of the day, Steve, if the judge does not rule in your favor?
I will have to accept that, but I also think an act of good faith is coming to the settlement table.
And they haven't done that?
No, they have not.
Not done to the
We've
settlement
even sent
table.
settlement offers out and not gotten responses.
Yeah. So you're free to settle. And you think if they were coming to the table, if they were actively negotiating with you, would you be willing to leave the house?
If we got into active negotiations, we would get to resolution quickly, I'm sure.
I think so.
I'm quite confident in that.
Yeah. I do want to ask you about something you said in a video, because it really struck me. And actually, we talked about it offline already. Yes. You seem to kind of try to vilify her for having the money to buy the house outright. It came across that way.
Yeah, thank you for asking on
Do you
this.
feel like it came across that way?
It certainly did, based on the comments I saw. It was unintentional. My point in mentioning that was specifically saying there were red flags here. The fact that it could not be financed was an indicator that there was a problem. Yeah. I don't care how much money she has. More power to her. She needed to have money to come into this.
It was apparently from a divorce settlement.
So be it. However it came through, it's her money to do with as she pleases, and more power to her. My comment specifically was saying, you knew you couldn't finance this. You did it in cash. So somebody was telling you, hey, you should be concerned about this. You may want to actually get to resolution before closing.
Yeah. So if it came off that way, not your intent.
It was completely
to say
unintentional.
that
No,
at all.
free market's a good thing.
Yeah.
Capitalism's a great thing.
Yeah.
I support it.
I also, looking through court documents on this case, there was an accusation that as it proceeds, you have not cooperated with discovery. Have you been at all?
We had a switch of attorney, and I think during that there was an issue.
Have you been cited by the judge in the case for not cooperating with discovery?
There was a cite, or I believe 2 months ago, right around the time we switched attorneys. So there was a cite in there, yeah.
Okay. Have you since started cooperating with discovery
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
part of the case?
Yeah, once
So
we had an attorney
all
who's
caught
on
up
it,
and
absolutely.
all that stuff, yeah.
Yes.
So if this isn't, you said you're trying to get summary judgment at the end of June, but it's possible, as you and I both know, we're involved in a lawsuit over something totally different, public records, and that's not always, timelines don't always work. And you said yourself, it could be end of the year or something like that. So are you fully prepared to and plan to stay in that home until there's a judgment?
I am fully prepared to get to a point where we settle. That's why we've called for summary judgment. We don't feel the need to wait till the end of the year for resolution. We push for summary judgment to happen at the end of June based off a certain number of provisions saying, we can get this solved now, let's do it. If we can't, and they're still not willing to come to the negotiating table, that's something they need to also look in the mirror and understand why that is.
So who do you blame more for the situation that you're in, him or her?
I mean, ultimately, I believe, what started us down that path was him. I think her stepping in was not a good decision. She certainly jumped into this thing. I mean, that's where I don't have a lot of sympathy, saying, hey, you came into this, you knew what you were getting into. This is a fight you chose. But that doesn't mean, I don't know, when you say blame, I want to be reasonable.
I want to know if you feel bad for her.
Do I feel bad for her? No. And simply because she has come in here and came into this knowing what she was getting into and now says that it's poor her. We are 3 adults. I'm not a victim any more than she is, any more than he is. These are 3 adults who have been in this type of stuff before, who have done real estate transactions in the past. She came in here and it's been said that she had a gamble in this. She saw it as so undervalued it was worth the risk. There comes risk. I came into this with risk, and now I'm experiencing what those risks are.
Yeah, and that risk could be judge doesn't rule with you.
100%.
And if the judge does not rule in your favor, going back to the squatting claim, will you leave?
It was absolutely. If that's,
No
I don't have a
question.
choice at that point.
You're not going to make him go through some sort of crazy process to get you out, right?
Let's see what he comes back with as a ruling, but I will honor the court process. That's where I wanted this thing to stay.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some of the other things past that. Because, that comes up, and then Jonathan Cho and Tyler, they're in this room full of people who says you wronged them. And that's kind of a scary scene to see. Jonathan says that he is up to more than 20 what he calls victims of Steve Hickey. So my understanding is that this comes out of a real estate or out of a construction business you had. Can you talk about that business a little bit?
Yeah, in basic details. So there was a construction company, Meridian Build Group, that was building homes, spec and some spec building. A spec home is when you're going to build it and then sell it at the end. And then there's custom. Custom does not mean high end. I think people think of that as high end. All it means is you come to me and say, I've already got land and I've got plans and I want you to build what I've already designed. Spec is I'm going to build it and then you'll come in later.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I was doing a mix of those. Things are going well. Clients are happy. We get into a dispute with a lender that is not advancing on the loan. And so that starts sending the company in a pretty big spiral. Out of this, I think Jonathan's kind of lumped everybody together. There are subcontractors not paid, and they have every right to be frustrated. I've been on the other end of that too. There's nothing that can be said that are going to make them feel okay about that. But that is not theft, and that is not a scam.
So the financing doesn't come through. So there's some subcontractors. He just highlighted one in a story that came out this morning of a guy who is out $100,000, and he characterizes it as like you stole that money from him. So have you seen the story that Jonathan put out this morning? What is your response when you hear that man's frustration of losing that money and blaming you for it?
So that man specifically, there was an argument about that because he was paid what was in his contract. He had significant change orders that he had done without ever calling him out until he was done, said, I just did more work and I'm owed money. So there was a dispute on that. In the end, though, I'm sure he was owed something. I don't doubt that. The company probably owed him something, and he has every right to be frustrated. That's not a good situation. That's still not theft or fraud as he's wanted to classify.
What is it then?
When you have a company wind down, there's going to be a loss. There generally is. When you have the money not coming in to cover those debts, that's a terrible situation. That's why businesses go into this stuff and have their pricing according to that to handle those types of things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not enough, right? It can still close a place. It did to Meridian.
So what happens to those subcontractors? They just sort of like, sucks to be them.
There were a lot that were settled out. The one who you're talking about who was in there, that was actually settled out as well. A lot of them were settled. I think that's kind of where he's also not drawing a line in the sand of who settled and who was still left holding the bag.
Yeah.
There were a number that were settled out on pennies on the dollar. Some got more, some got less. So it's all over the place.
So what they got is what they got. Like there's no money coming for them.
No,
basically.
At that point, there's nothing left.
Yeah. I want to ask you about another couple that spoke, Jessica Scotty and her husband, Kruse. So they say they were the victims, and that's the characterization, of real estate development theft perpetrated by you. They told Tyler Oliveira that you backed out of the home. It says, Hickey backed out of the home the Scotty family are currently sitting in once he had quite a bit of money that he could get his hands on from their bank loan from Flagstar Bank. They said, basically, we were left in shambles with about $40,000 in lines, as well as $90,000 in bank money that should have been provided, that he could not provide the proof of where that money went.
Yeah. So
what happened with that?
There are certainly clients who did not get their homes finished, but this one I really took issue with, and I found it odd as that being his starting story. That in my response, I went through it very clearly. She had made a comment too that, I hadn't even looked into him. We just hired him. It took months to get approved by Flagstar. They went through past clients. They went through credit lines. They went through everything before getting approved. Here's how the payments work in her project specifically and projects like that. So she has a land. This was a custom. So she had a piece of property she wanted the home built on. They had a small home on the back. They're building a big home on the front.
Okay.
So we start getting into this. At every point in time, we complete a portion, say the foundation. Yeah. Then we call her, say, okay, the foundation's done. Come take a look. She signs off. Then that goes to the bank. The bank then says, okay, we're going to send another third-party inspector out there to still verify on top of it that it's complete. Until all that's done, no money goes out. So this idea that somehow there was money taken along the way is absurd. Next, the big thing that really harmed that project was it was being built during 2020, right in there in the center of the pandemic. Lumber skyrocketed. So there was a particular lumber. We'd already gotten a full bid out package, and the lumber package we have, I don't want to mess the number up, but it was somewhere in the $40,000-$50,000 range. She has somebody she said she knew from the past who's in the lumber business and can supply it for less. So I said, I don't know how. These are commodity items. There's not a lot of room in commodities, but she says, we go way back, use him. We sign up, they go for it, they ship all the lumber, then come back in the end and say, well, we missed the top floor takeoff and lumber skyrocketed because of the pandemic. There's nothing we can do. So I get this bill, and it's like 2-3 times the cost of the original lumber package. It's not that it's not in line with other lumber companies, but based on where we're at now, that they missed the entire takeoff on the top floor and the fact that it's skyrocketed, we got a problem.
Yeah.
So I come to her and say, hey, what are we going to do here? And she goes, that's not my problem. That's your problem. You need to pay the overage. And I was like, that's not how this works. That is not how this works. This is a cost plus deal. It's open book. When I come in under, you get the savings. If I come in over, you have to pay that. Otherwise, in the end, why don't we just mark the house up 100% and say, hey, I'll build something for that. Then that already puts us in an adversarial relationship, because now you're having to negotiate against me at every purchase. She's frustrated. She calls a lumber company. They're not going to move. She realizes and it's a big variance. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. So she pushes back, doesn't want to pay it. The bank gets involved. And the bank actually made what I thought was a pretty big concession. They said, we have a number of projects, especially on lumber right now with the pandemic, that are getting stalled out. What we would suggest and what we will allow in this loan is a one-time modification, and you can pull from some of your final finished budgets. Bring your appliances down, your flooring, and so on, and let's just keep this moving. She says no. She refused. At that point, what are we going to do? You're not paying the bill. We can't keep going without the bill paid.
Yeah.
We're done. There was a huge amount of email traffic on this as well, including budget reconciliations and everything. It's open book. You get receipts for all of it.
Yeah. So with all the construction stuff, and I think, you do journalism, and we were just doing a story today on a political candidate who man, a lot of stuff comes out about him.
Sure.
And he always finds excuses for, it's not me, I'm the victim. So as a journalist, it goes back to that kind of where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you're talking about a couple dozen people who come out as Steve Hickey wronged me, I'm a victim of his, you see why my antenna would go up.
Sure.
Because it's sort of at some point, Is it all of them? They're just like mistaken, or is it you?
I've already said clearly the subcontractors have a reason to be unhappy. Like, I'm not saying, and I don't like the word victim. I'm not a victim. I don't believe the other parties are victims. This is a tough situation. These are adults getting into these things.
If I was out $100,000, I'd be like, I'm a victim. Victim. So are they a victim of the market? Are they a victim of COVID? Are they a victim of a poorly run construction company?
To me, victim, you're getting into like intent, saying somebody did this to you.
Yeah.
That's different. If I went in and just took your money, that's a victim. That's a crime. When we're dealing with extenuating circumstances here and it goes, this is what the costs are, by all means, do you want to go dispute the lumber company with me? I'll go right along with you.
And you've never been charged with a crime related to any of it or anything like that. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's anything you could have or should have done better to try to make sure that company did not?
Yeah. My belief is no matter what, in the end, there's something that could have been done. I mean, I'd been through this back in 08, 09, and there were people who got through it, and there were some that got through and some that didn't. And it was easy to say, oh, it's the market. And yeah, it is. But also, what could you have done differently? What do you learn from that? What can you do going forward? There's always something. I don't care if you get hit by a train leaving here. There's something you could have done, right? There's always something.
Do you think this is a common occurrence for people who run construction companies?
It's a business that's tough with that. The margins are very thin, and it's on big numbers. So you're coming in making 10 to 20, some merch 25% on hundreds of thousands of dollars of transactions. So if you have a project like that project stall out and there's $90,000 or whatever it is of unpaid lumber, that's a big deal.
Why do you think that they're all coming out about you? If this is something that happens, sometimes construction companies go under, subcontractors aren't paid, people aren't happy, their work wasn't finished, they feel wronged. I feel like I'd be hearing more stories. Is it because of who you are, you think, and your following and your...
I think, well, once you had, so as I mentioned earlier, the superintendent on those projects was the son of the person that I got the home in Ravensdale with. So when Jonathan Cho goes on this fact-finding mission, they go, well, why don't you talk to these people who otherwise are in the past and we're trying to move on from and we're trying to figure out what life is after all of that. Right. And then he's going out and contacting me. He did the same thing when he came out to the fire department. He's coming out trying to ping people and say, well, did you know about this though? Oh, you think he's okay, but what about this? And it's just continue to try and drag this up. If this was something I was doing, I've been public for some time. I didn't just blow up last month. This has been years in the making. And so, I don't want to diminish people being frustrated, especially the subcontractors who lost money. I don't want to diminish that at all. But if this was some sort of like organized thing, where were they 2-3 years ago? And still now somebody's coming and knocking on their door going, well, would you like to vent about it?
But sometimes that's what happens in news. Until you go ask somebody what happened, they're not going to talk about it. And they're like, you know what, I would like to vent about it.
Sure. But
the comments online, I know that these people are just social media things, but he took me for $25,000. He was supposed to build my house in West Seattle and ran with the money. Does that ring any bells to you, Scott? There's comments like that. So the videos get posted and you've got, a couple dozen people who are making claims, just maybe a handful in the video. And then you look at the comments and you've got people saying, he took me for money too. He was supposed to build my house for me. So it paints a picture of like this overwhelming amount of people spinning the same tale. And that's kind of hard to diminish in my mind.
So as I mentioned in the beginning, Harrison, who was the superintendent, who's the previous owner's son, connected these dots of saying, hey, talk to Scotty, specifically talk to them. Once you start putting that out there, and there's a company that closed down, and I was open about the fact that there were subcontractors. There's public record of this stuff.
Yeah, you haven't excused that.
No, not at all, and I don't intend to. Even if I could say, to your point about victims, say, well, it was this, it was all these things. In the end, it still happened.
Right.
It did. Like, there's no taking that back. So I'm not going to say, oh, they just need to suck it up. That would be extremely callous. And it's if I don't care. I've been sorting through this for years, trying to settle this stuff. Yeah.
So those things are one thing. And then this comes out, and as you know, happens, like other things pop up, and this fire commissioner thing. So first of all, what is your job title and what's your role?
Yeah. So I'm a King County Fire Commissioner, District 47, Seat 3. So every district's going to have an odd number of commissioners because no one commissioner can go out and make decisions and do stuff. And this one, please ask me, because I really do. I have some hard pushback on some of this.
We'll get to it.
Please. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. But that's an elected position, correct?
That's correct.
And then are you also an EMT?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, you are. So do you do actively EMT work? How does that work? Volunteer? What is it?
It's a completely volunteer job.
Gotcha.
So it's a volunteer position, I guess. So on the public elected side, I make about $140 for going to a meeting once a month. It's not,
Gotcha.
It's not, I think Jonathan's fundamentally misunderstood what a fire commissioner is. I think he feels it's some sort of authoritative position. It's not in any way. It's a budgetary and planning position.
I mean, anything elected, you have a responsibility. I don't care if
I
you're
didn't
like
say
the
no responsibility.
water
I'm saying
commissioner, but
authoritative.
yeah. So you're on leave. You put yourself on
That's
leave.
correct.
Why?
Because there were accusations. I want to be very clear about this. Jonathan Cho's coming out saying sources tell me. As a journalist, he made the complaint. That's a big deal. That matters a lot. So if you're going to go out and he went out and actually made the actual complaint to the fire department accusing me of abuse of power and using station equipment and I believe all this idea to push my social media.
I'm sorry, he made the complaint. Define that more.
He literally wrote the complaint as himself. I'm not uncovering him. He made it as himself and communicated, even said he wanted to do it by phone. They said, you need to do this in writing.
Yeah.
He made the complaint.
Okay.
As a journalist, you don't make the complaint so you can cover it. If somebody had made a complaint, I would see this much differently.
Yeah.
Jonathan Cho fundamentally made the complaint and then covered it and then put it out and says, well, sources tell me. Yeah. Sources don't need to tell you the thing you did.
And I didn't know that. So I'll ask him about that.
And to me, it's akin to in the Stringer world. I go light the house on fire and then I'm there first with the camera. I just got here first. Well, no, you lit the house on fire. And now you're claiming you're just covering it.
So that was the first I heard of that. So I, of course, after our interview, reached back out to Jonathan Cho, someone I have a lot of respect for, and said, hey, is that true? Are you the one who was covering the story and decided to file the complaint with the fire district to sort of force Steve to step away? And he says that's not true. And he forwarded me the entire thread that he had with the fire district, the entire email thread. And in it, he has a request that's, as a journalist, basically saying, are you aware of these allegations against Steve Hickey? You know, what is being done to investigate him? And after I followed up with Jonathan, he asked a woman named Tracy Stiles with the King County Fire District in question if she would be willing to confirm that he never filed an official complaint. And she did say in this email provided by Jonathan Cho, good morning, Jonathan. I can confirm that my understanding has always been that you are bringing forward allegations from others. And it certainly was not the intention of our press release to state you personally were making them, rather that you had brought them forward. So she says they're going to try to go and clear that up. I've asked Steve, do you have any sort of other evidence that would, suggest that Jonathan is lying about this? But it seems pretty clear that even the fire district says, no, it wasn't Jonathan Cho making the complaint. It was him as a journalist coming forward about complaints that other people had. The accusation being that you're using this position to sort of get to these scenes and to take video for your social media.
Which is absurd. I've never filmed a situation in the district that I serve. First, I want to be very clear with that. Okay. I've never gone and used that for my social media. Does not work that way. Second, my coming out, I would never go to a scene. If I went to a scene, you should come with me. So maybe we'll do an undercover where I go in and say, hey, I'm a commissioner. Right. Let's see how that works out for me.
So I will ask Jonathan Cho about what you're saying is that he filed the complaint, but there's some other people who are on the record as sharing similar sentiments. So I want to read a couple of those to you and have you respond to them. So this is from an EMT who doesn't want to use their name, understandably so. I've had an issue with Steve's use of department equipment to financially support his photography and videography business on social media. He uses his access as a commissioner to have radios to chase calls and then sells the content for profit.
False.
You've never used radios or any equipment, as he's saying.
No, you get that stuff. I have subscriptions online that are far better access than a fire department radio. Yeah.
He's also an EMT. On February 26, 2022, he arrived first on an accident, called it in over the radio, talked to the patient, then abandoned the patient to go back to his car to live stream it on TikTok.
No.
Never happened.
No. They've pulled the incident. It's not even in the town I serve. This is ridiculous.
So did something like that happen just not in the town you serve?
No, I was driving down Maple Valley Highway with my phone already mounted on the windshield, doing whatever I do. Yeah. I pulled up on an accident, called in so they could come and take it. Yeah. That's their call. That's not mine.
Did you, as an EMT, though, check on the patient, make sure the patient was fine?
No, they already had people coming. When I radioed in, they already had Renton PD coming. Yeah. They come and take that. I don't have any EMT gear with me. Yeah. I'm not going to go out and start rendering care. I'm going to make sure that there's people showing who have all of that and they can take care of it.
You don't have a duty to to serve if you're up on a scene like that? There's no sort of duty?
If there was somebody in a life-threatening position, needed CPR,
right,
maybe that, but I'm not coming. I don't have any equipment. I don't have anything.
But you didn't check on them, you said, or did you go check on them?
At that point, I walk up, I see that there's 2 cars, let them know, hey, you got 2 cars. It looks like they've collided in an intersection. You guys need to have people on out here. And they send people on out there. They take care of the call.
And you did you live stream it on TikTok though?
If it was on my dashboard, it would be on there, but I'm not live. It's not like, I have a call, I'm going to live stream.
Yeah. So that wasn't sort of an official response to a call in your job that you abandoned a patient as this characterization. Because this is the, an EMT told another EMT, this is the text that they send. Here's a new one. Steve is out doing his thing in Renton, comes across an accident and calls it over Fire 1, does a triage, requests an MVA response, goes back to his car and live streams on TikTok before fire even arrives, leaving the patient with PD that he just triaged. Totally false?
No, I'm thinking through it as you're reading through it, remembering back because it's 2.5 years ago. No.
Yeah.
No, they take care of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't go and take care of that.
Yeah. What would be in it for those EMTs to claim that?
One of them is part of the media.
Okay. Who is it?
I'm not going to go out and put out names if they don't want their name out there.
What do you mean part of the media?
They are a competing stringer out there.
And so they feel like it's a competing stringer who sells stuff to the media. That's interesting. And you think that they would have like a competitive reason to push that out there?
I don't know why else they would.
Yeah. So there's another one that came out, and this one, the letter has actually been released. And I'm sure you've read it by now. I think Ari Hoffman put it out. I want to get the guy's name. Brad Cheney, Public Information Officer, Captain, South King County Fire and Rescue. Do you know Brad?
I know of him. I've ran across him, but I wouldn't.
So you don't have any sort of like weird relationship where he'd be out to get you?
No, there's no working relationship, anything like that.
So he sent out an email to other public information officers. I'll read it for folks. Please see the email and an attached photo from Captain Cheney. Literally put a photo of you in this email. I'm writing to you today to provide some caution around a new individual who tries to pass himself off as media. His name is Steve Hickey. He tries to pass himself off as working for one of the larger local news agencies, but he does not. Do you try to pass yourself off?
No, never. And you can check
for a local news agency.
I've always been clear. I don't work for them. I try to make that part of my brand as I do it different than them.
I just had my first encounter with him on our 3rd alarm fire, and it was awkward. The real concerns are his lack of professionalism and integrity, also live streaming videos without your knowledge. Do you live stream videos without people's knowledge, just on public property?
He'll explain the incident and there I can speak to it.
Recently, he videotaped a rope rescue posing as media. He then aired the video via his personal social media accounts and added commentary saying the resources then went back to the station to fist bump each other, tie really weird knots, and play Xbox all night. I'm not entirely sure of his need for what I consider inappropriate commentary, but it gets worse. I, like you, have great relationships with our local photographers, and they do excellent work. I would hate for this one individual to ruin their credibility and the partnerships they have worked so hard to build. They are a powerful partner for us PIOs, and unfortunately, I think this one individual can tarnish others in their line of work. Please be advised of Steve and his lack of judgment, character, and integrity while you're operating on the scene.
Sure. So first, it's good to point out here, clearly he had no idea that I had any role in the fire service or anything like that when he sent this out, which is fine. I wouldn't go out there and say that I did. What started off at that 3-alarm fire was I had one-on-one called him out for an inappropriate working relationship with one of the other people from the media. The apartment management asked that all media get off the property. You remember from back in the day, sometimes you run into those, right? There's a big apartment thing. The manager wants you out. So as we're all leaving, he then allows a different one to come in and then tells them that he works for them now. He does not work for them. But he says, well, we share stuff all the time. He can come on in. And I said...
So it's from a different media outlet giving somebody else special treatment to come into
and
a
so
scene.
One-on-one, I said, what are you doing? That's a huge risk to be out there doing it. He goes and posts that stuff. That's going to be a huge problem. They just kicked all of us off. You're letting him in? This is bizarre. I'm thinking we're having a one-on-one. I have no problem with anybody being honest with them face to face, right? I would never talk to somebody like that in front of a group.
Yeah.
I then leave, and then out comes this email. And it took about a day or so, because then my chief calls me going, hey, your name's on this. What are you out there doing? And I get called in. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I find out that there's this email that was sent. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I just talked to the guy. I thought we were good. We end up running into each other on a rope rescue, a trench collapse in Bellevue the week after. Comes up, fist bumps, like was all calm. He's like, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you on more scenes. I think he sent it in haste, not really thinking it through. the way he categorizes me as not media, I think is highly inappropriate. But his frustration.
I agree with that, by the way.
I think his frustration was in the moment, and he made a snap decision. The point about me streaming people without their knowledge, there was a drowning off Pipe Lake in Kent Covington area. There was a voice that was heard, and it was one of the other stringers who came up after talking to one of the officers, fire officers on scene, and said, "Oh yeah, here's what we got," and just mouthed off a handful of things. And they thought that was me standing next to a cop. And you can tell clearly, I'll release the video. You can see the video. I'm standing way far back, not in scene. Right. I would never, if somebody wants to come up and say hi, I usually step away from the camera because I don't know, they may want to say, "Hey, I've seen your stuff before," whatever, or ask something about that. I don't want them being streamed without them knowing. I would never do that.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. So when he says, you have a lack of judgment, character, and integrity while you're operating on scene, you believe that was in a moment of anger? Because I
believe so. I'll send you the video I'll send you the video that he calls out to, where apparently I made these inappropriate statements. The entire video was how unique these ropes teams are. The fact that they're actually firefighters who also specialize in a thing, and how cool the rescue was. It was a feel-good piece, right?
Yeah.
And in the end, I made a joke. And the joke is, it's an old cop firefighter thing. The cops always think that firefighters are sitting back there making chili, playing Xbox, right? Yeah. That's all. It's not a great joke. Yeah, it's not a great joke. Nobody likes to tell a joke that goes flat. The entire rest, I think it was a 40-second video. The other 32 seconds is how awesome they are. Yeah. If that's all it takes, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Right. What do you think? You've talked a lot about Jonathan Cho today, and he's obviously been driving some of this coverage, although it's been picked up elsewhere. What do you think would be his motivation for stirring up a bunch of, if that's, because it seems like that's what you think, is he's going in here, filing complaints, intentionally getting people, trying to get media on board to cover what you're doing. What would be his motivation for that?
I mean, for him, I think it's definitely content and views, right? He wants to be able to put stuff out there.
I don't think he's had a problem getting content and views, right? Why would he need you to leverage content and views?
Well, if he was going in for a squatter situation, he had many of other options. He went down this path. He wanted this path. He made that very clear up front. And when he was contacted by the landlord advocacy group, it was pretty clear that he needed to come out and show results. So he himself has said this, like, I can't let this thing go now. I got to be in this thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to say clout, like he's got a strong following, and he's also, and this is, I would say this is a compliment to him. His business is far more profitable than mine with a smaller amount. So it's not like, I could say, well, I have all these followers. Well, if you're able to actually get more revenue out of smaller, any business wants to make more with less, right? That's kind of the beauty of it. So it's not, I don't think it's this cloud of followership, but I think he does have a responsibility to push a narrative. And I think that he went into this. I know he'll probably never say this in public. I think part of him goes back and goes, man, this may have not been what I thought it was going to be going into it, but now I'm in this thing deep. I'm staying the course.
Jonathan told me when I chatted with him today that, he felt like you guys had kind of been friends before all this happened, like at least acquaintances exchanging texts and
stuff. We pass each other all the time. And
one of the things he mentioned is that the Discovery Institute was looking to hire you. Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah, apparently.
You weren't interested, or?
I was. So at first he comes and hits me up. He says, hey, we're looking for somebody to go and do stuff in Spokane.
Right.
I had concerns. So I'll keep it tight, but what I like to do is come in and kind of stay centered on the road. It's not that I don't believe politics are involved in anything. And I actually would even go so far as to say, I think ideologically, probably a lot of what Discovery Institute wants is things I would be interested in as well. But I think when you come out to a scene or a story and you start out with, well, the woke city council did this. Now, that's a categorization, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I don't do that. I want to come in at the early part of a situation and lay out the base set of undisputable facts. Yeah. Now, from there, when I'm done, let's say you pick up you have the baton.
Right.
You got to do whatever you got to do, and you want to go down the path and say, here's what I believe is really happening here, bigger picture. I don't have a problem with that, but it's not what I do.
Right.
And I think the way that he goes about, especially these homeless stories, it's to go out there and get a reaction. And I said, I have concern about that. And I would say this almost too is a credit to his demeanor. I had said to him point blank, I said, I don't know that I want to go down and do what you do. And his response was, no one can do what I do. That's why I do it. And I said, I kind of respected the bluntness of it. And he says, they want you to do something different. Yeah. They want stuff out of Spokane.
Now, Jonathan's assertion is that that you were interested in the job.
In the beginning, I was interested and intrigued by the idea. The farther we got into it, the more concerned I got. I got advice from some other people going, hey, what do you think of this? You know, he never got to an exact number, but he was talking about, he's like, it'll be more money than you'll know what to do with. And you only have to go over a few days a week.
Yeah.
And that's enticing, right? And if I can actually do it my way, that would be very enticing.
He says it fell apart because he found out about that in his assertion you were squatting.
It was already falling apart.
Okay.
Like it was not going to happen. Once I went and talked to some other people, there was this concern of like, what is the brand, right? What do I want to do? And coming back to my point earlier, I have 10 times the following and he's probably making 3 times the money.
I don't know how much he makes. I don't know how much you make.
I'm just throwing that out. Like and this is not a negative on him. It's just my path is a longer path.
Yeah.
And so even if I get to 2 million followers, I probably still won't be able to generate the revenue. It's one of the downsides to doing it the way that I do it. But I'm this far into it. I want to stay down the center path because my belief is if you can shoot it straight, what happens is you come on and you throw something spicy in there.
Yeah.
40 or 50% are going to shut you out instantly, right?
Sure.
They go, you already said a thing I don't like, I'm out.
Yeah.
If I do it my way, I probably got 30, 40% of like both sides. The amount of cops that follow me and the amount of people I found on doing the story about the city councilman who is accused of murdering that girl, the amount of people I get from both sides of the street is really unique.
Yeah.
Because when I go to certain areas, I don't come in and say, oh, this is happening and it's because there's no fathers in the home. It's just, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Again, take the baton, go take it down wherever you want. I'll sell to Fox or CNN, right? You can do what you got to do. I'm here for the indisputable part, and I want to stay that course.
Yeah. So kind of looking at all this in totality, I've got this big following that you're growing. I've been in the public sphere in Washington for 15 years.
Yeah.
And you could do a deep, deep dive into my background and you're not going to find shit. That's what I really struggle with. That's the one thing I struggle with is the preponderance of people saying bad things about you. How do you explain that?
I've been in the business for a while as well in a very different way. I've gone at this very aggressively. Everything I go into aggressively. I said in the beginning, real estate's not an easy business. I don't know that if I had to do it over again, which nobody ever gets to, but I wish I'd gotten in the line of work I'm in now 20 years ago. I don't know that it could have because it was a different thing back then. You didn't have social media. But, my goal now is to try and do good work the community can value, the community can take in no matter what their kind of predisposed bias is and so on, and focus on that. I will go through and deal with any problems that I have from the past and go through and deal with all the consequences that come with it. I think when you have somebody coming at you like this and continuing to try and paint a narrative at the same time, it doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
It makes things far worse.
Do you feel like you have an unusual amount of people saying bad things about you?
I don't see how you don't. When you have to wind down a company like that and there's that many people who are left out in the cold, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. So it really stems a lot from that. But it's in different areas too. The fire service and people saying, oh, he's doing this and he's inappropriate about it.
I think you should call those people and have them come in and talk to you.
Yeah.
I really do. I really believe that I think Brad sent that in, PIO Cheney sent that in haste.
Sure.
And I don't know that he would today still stand by it. I think he would say, hey, I was frustrated in the moment. I made a snap judgment and I wish I hadn't, but I did.
Yeah. We'll reach out to him. Steve, I appreciate you coming in and answering the questions that I had. What's your plan moving forward? Anything change for you?
At this point, I have to be careful about the stuff I put. I'm trying to still keep content going out. It gets hit pretty hard by the trolls at the same time, which in itself, I have thick skin, but a lot of these stories I'm doing to try and actually like help people whose lives have changed. I have GoFundMes. And so, those kind of things, it's like, you never want to put out a piece of work that doesn't hit, right? I'm sure relate that, but there's also something too when you're doing it to also accomplish something for somebody else who has needs. Yeah. When it flops, that kind of that stings.
What do you want people to know about you if they watch these reports and have formulated an opinion?
Yeah, base me on the totality of that work. Watch that work in full. I think if you watch enough of the stuff, you'll see where I stand.
Yeah. And for Ms. Freitag, no chance to get you out of that house while things pen?
We are here to settle at any moment in time, and I hope the three of us get to that table and get that done.
Gotcha. I hope so too. And where are you going to live after that?
Probably still in Ravensdale if I want to maintain being a fire commissioner.
Okay, gotcha. All right, Steve Hickey, we appreciate you coming in. It was
Thank you.
nice to meet you and get a chance to chat.
Thank you.